Hey everyone, welcome to the Marriage Foundation podcast. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Dwayne.
So today I want to talk more to the women. Last week we did an episode talking more to the men, and today I want to talk to the ladies because we seem to have a hard time with Ephesians 5:21 and submitting to our husbands. And I get it. It's really hard for us because, well, first of all, it goes all the way back to Genesis 3:16, where it says, "Then he said to the woman, I will sharpen the pain of your pregnancy, and in pain you will give birth, and you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you." So we have this desire just in us to be in control, right? That's just how we are ever since the fall. And in all honesty, we often feel like the boss. We feel like we're in control. We feel like the head of the household because we're typically the ones that are in charge of the household. We are doing the majority of the child rearing. We are doing the cooking, the cleaning. We're chauffeurs. We are teachers. We are just all the logistical things that come with managing the household that generally falls on us women. So I hear that all the time. Women say, I run this house. I'm the head of this house. And I understand where that feeling and thought comes from. But the husband is still the head of the house. He is still the leader. And our husbands have a huge responsibility to be loving us as Christ loves the church. They need to be leading us into a deeper relationship with Christ, and they should be serving us. They should be doing what's best for us, dying to themselves the way Christ died for the church. Our husbands, as leaders, should be leading as an example. They should be humble. They should be leading us by serving us. And when they're fulfilling the role that God calls them to, what he demands of them, we feel secure to submit. We feel safe to submit. The same way that Christ's love for us draws us into submission to him. The way he loves us causes us to want to submit to him. And it should be that way for our husbands. Our husbands have the responsibility to love us in such a way that we want to submit to them. In our house, I am also the one that does the majority of the household logistics. I'm the one that cooks. I'm the one that cleans a lot. Dwayne does help out a lot. Fortunately, he does help out a lot. He is great with that. So I realize how blessed I am.
But in other households, it might not be the case where the husband's helping around the house a lot.
Right. And that can be difficult, but it also gives this false sense of feeling like the boss, feeling like the head of household. I'm in charge of the finances. Dwayne is completely lost when it comes to that. I'm better at it, so I do it. And I think if I were to try and show him, he would have a deer in the headlights kind of look.
I would.
Because that's just not where his strong suit is. And it's okay for our husbands to give us that authority in things.
And it's also complementary. Like some of the things that I'm not strongly suited for, she might be. And that's where the complementary part comes in the relationship. When the two become one, she brings her strengths to the relationship, and I bring my strengths to the relationship, as well as my weaknesses that she covers over with her strengths.
Exactly. And I hear that a lot, a complementarian viewpoint of it, and there are people, the wife should submit and the man can do whatever he wants. He can abuse her, he can cheat on her, he's the man, he's the boss, and whatever he says goes, period. And
that's an abuse of authority.
Right. And that's not safe, that's not healthy, that's actually breaking your vows. He is to love you as Christ loves the church, and if he's not doing that, he is breaking his vows. And especially if there is physical abuse, I'm not going to tell you to divorce, but I would highly encourage you to get to safety. You need to protect yourself and your children if you have them. And that is the top priority. I'm not going to advise one way or another on divorce in those situations. God can and does restore. I don't think it's healthy to hold out for that while you're in an unsafe situation. And you should definitely get help and get away. If it's possible for your marriage to be redeemed in these cases, you can do that from a distance. You can do that with boundaries. You can do that while you're safe. Again, I'm not going to advise you one way or another, but I highly encourage you to put your safety above whatever you want to make your marriage work. So outside of that, when we're not dealing with a abusive husband or narcissist husband or whatever, how do we submit to our husbands when they aren't loving us well? Well, we submit to Christ. In any given situation, we submit to Christ. And that's not easy to do, but where there is strife, there is pride. But wisdom is found in those who take advice. Where there is strife, there is pride. That's Proverbs 13:10. Where there is strife, there is pride. Period. If there's any conflict, there is pride. Whether it's one-sided or both, usually it's both, but there's always pride. Every single time. I know when I'm being stubborn. I know when I'm being difficult. I know when I'm being judgmental, angry, irritable, unreasonable, any other bad, defiant word that you want to use. I know when I'm being that. We used in the past the example of an argument that Dwayne and I had where we were both being stubborn, and I felt that God was calling me to hold Dwayne's hand, but I didn't want to hold his hand. I felt that I was right, and I wanted him to submit. I wanted him to come to me and apologize to me, but God was calling me to hold his hand. And I grabbed his hand, and in that moment, the argument was over. The disagreement was over, and it wasn't even anything serious. It was a stupid, petty argument, but I had a choice to make. I could have held on to my stubbornness, and he could have held on to his stubbornness, and we could have just let that ruin our day, and resentment could have grown, and
bitterness could have taken root.
And it could have just been this spiraling thing that gets out of control. I didn't want that. I never want that. So I had to swallow my pride, because it was my pride that was not wanting to hold his hand. So I swallowed my pride and I held his hand, and the argument was over, and his stubbornness melted away, my stubbornness melted away, and the result was peace and resolution. And that is far better than the other result, which could have been, like we said, just a spiraling ball of just craziness of bitterness and anger and resentment, and that's not good. That's not healthy. It's never good. Our husband's authority does not mean that we have to be doormats. We have to have discernment, and there may be times or situations where we need to stand strong and have strong and clear boundaries. Again, if you find yourself in a relationship with a narcissist or an abusive husband, whatever, you need to seek godly wisdom. And that's not advice that we can give you right here in this podcast. We can't just tell you one way or another. Situations, relationships are complex, and we cannot advise you one way or another in that. But I've noticed, especially, I've talked about those marriage advice groups, and I've noticed that a lot of women do not want advice. They want validation. They want affirmation. They want to be told that they're right and their husbands are wrong. And I am blown away at the amount of comments that just take that one little snippet that someone posted in the group asking for advice, and you need to leave, you need to divorce, he's this, he's that, blah, 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 blah. You get one side of the story, and people are giving advice like they know the fullness of it, and the woman should just divorce and leave. And this is a Christian marriage advice group. And I don't understand that, because even if you are in a relationship with an abuser or a narcissist, it doesn't mean that you don't have your own flaws and things that you need to work on yourself. And especially if you are in those situations with a narcissist or an abuser or whatever, you really need to focus on your own flaws and things that you need to work on, so that you aren't taking that into your next relationship and getting back into another relationship with someone that's going to turn out to be abusive or a narcissist or whatever, because that seems to be a cycle that women just get into. They just continually date. I've said this before, they date the same person with a different face.
And a lot of times they're like bad apple personalities. Like, it's what they left the first time around or the second or third time around, only to go back to a different person with the same characteristics of the last people that they left.
And that's where it comes in, that you really need to work on yourself. You need to recognize your flaws. You need to recognize your triggers, so to speak. That's the hot take word these days. You need to heal yourself and do better next time. Really, we talked about red flags last time, or a couple weeks ago, and that really was going to solve a lot of your issues. If you're paying attention to those red flags, you're not going to end up in a marriage with a narcissist or an abuser. Typically. Now, can't say that would never happen, because there are situations where people just are really good at hiding their personalities, I guess, and then it comes out in marriage. So I can't say that it would never happen, but the likelihood of that happening goes way, way down. If you are really, truly looking at a relationship, honestly, you're looking at it from a godly perspective. If you are seeking God in your relationship above your own will, and He will point out those red flags. He will. And it's up to you to follow them. So that's really where it's so important for you to be paying attention and just make good choices from the beginning. Really, that's what it comes down to. Make good choices from the very beginning. Choose the right person from the very beginning. That's going to solve a lot of these potential issues you could find yourself in.
And hardships that you're going to inevitably go through.
Right.
And just a quick thought on dating. I know dating probably isn't the proper term for what Christians are supposed to be doing, but it's the idea of getting to know somebody and decide whether you want to be in a relationship with that person. And I was just going to say that if you're not dating with the idea of marriage, then you shouldn't be doing that. Anybody that you are dating, you should always be doing with the prospect of if that's the person that you want to marry.
Yeah, there's no point in dating if you're not looking to get married. It's pointless to me. I don't know why you would even mess around with dating someone that you don't potentially want to marry. But anyways, how do we submit to our husbands if he's not abusive, he's not a narcissist, he is truly a believer, but he's wrong in this certain situation, or he's not living up to the role that God placed on him to be the leader? A lot of women complain that their husbands won't lead, and they spend all their time playing video games and going out with their friends, and they don't really play with the kids, they don't help with the chores, they don't do this, they don't do that. That's a pretty common complaint, and a lot of women feel that it's like taking care of another child, and I understand that, and it's hard to deal with that, but you can't change him. You can only change yourself, and you have to give it to God. You submit to Christ first. What is God asking you to do in this situation? And I know. Like I said, I know when I am defying, even if it's God, even if it's not necessarily my husband. Like I said, in that argument with Dwayne, it wasn't about him necessarily. It was what God was calling me to do. I wasn't necessarily submitting to Dwayne. I was submitting to God. And I had a choice to make. I could submit to God or I could not submit to God. And those two paths had very different outcomes. And you know that. You know in any given situation, if you have a relationship with Christ and you are truly trying to honor him, then you know what he's calling you to do in these situations. Most of the time. There are situations that you obviously just don't know what to do. And in those times, you have to pray and you have to give it to God, and you just have to have patience. Read the Bible. Seek godly wisdom. If it's something really serious, go to your pastor or elders or whoever that you trust to help you in the situation. And only you know what you need or what to do. I can't tell you what to do, but we are still called to submit to our husbands. And so when it's hard to do that, when it's hard to give in and swallow our pride and our husband's making a wrong choice or you just don't like the choice, then you submit to Christ first. And like I said, if the answer isn't clear, then seek the wisdom, seek godly wisdom, read the Bible, pray, and have patience.
For the wife, she can also go to the church leadership after talking to her husband first. You have to talk to your significant other first. But if these things aren't being remedied, then you could talk to church leadership and have them talk to your husband and see where it goes from there. You always start when you have odd against somebody or when they're doing something to you wrong. You can talk to them about your feelings. Earlier, Lindsay had said something about being upfront about what you're feeling and the boundaries and stuff like that, so that when it comes and and they've crossed those boundaries against you, you can let them know about it. So bringing church leadership into it would also probably help you in order to bring light upon the situation and somebody else is involved. But also, unfortunately, a lot of the women who are encountering these problems probably aren't even involved in a local congregation, in a local church. So they have no good Christian examples or good Christian leadership that they can go to and talk about these issues. So to start from scratch, it's always important to be involved in a church. And we've said that on numerous podcasts. Being involved in a good, healthy church, local congregation would help both of your guys' relationship with God grow, because you're around godly examples. You're hearing the true word of God being preached, and all of those things edify you both.
Really, it comes down to communication, ultimately. You need to communicate. You need to understand yourself. Really, you need to understand yourself. That is the biggest thing. You need to understand why you feel the way you feel. Dwayne is a soccer coach, and he's always going to soccer things. And he has a habit of coming home kind of late and not letting me know. And that's something that has irritated me at times, and it bothered him that it bothered me, because he feels like he's not doing anything wrong, and he's not necessarily. He's not. I know he's not going out cheating. I know it's not a question of, oh, what's he doing? Who's he with? Who's he talking to? I don't think that at all, but I had to tell him that. I had to tell him, I don't think that you are out doing anything that you're not supposed to be doing. That's not even crossing my mind. What bothers me is that when I'm expecting you and you're not home, and then I don't know that you're going to be later than expected, then I'm kind of waiting around. Sometimes that has to do with dinner. Am I going to eat now? Am I waiting? You could walk in the door any time and then I've already eaten dinner or whatever. But what I told him ultimately is that I get excited for him to come home. I'm excited to see him. And so when he's way later than I expected, it's not necessarily that I'm mad. It's just I'm a little bit irritated because I was expecting you a long time ago and you weren't there. And now it's way late. And now it's just how I guess I was reacting to it. And again, it's not that he was necessarily doing anything wrong, and it's not necessarily that my feelings are wrong, but it's one of those situations that we have to communicate, and you have to understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and you have to communicate that to your spouse. Both sides need to do that. You both need to know why you feel the way you feel, and then you need to communicate that clearly to them. In one of the wives groups, men don't do subtleties at all, and the wife, she told the story of how she needed to go to the ER, and the husband had planned a golf game, or I don't even know, it may not have been the ER, it may have been just an appointment. I think she was having some kind of cancer scare or something. I don't know. I don't remember. But he had a scheduled golf game, and he asked her if she needed him to be home for him, or to be home, or for her, or to be home to watch the baby. And she said to watch the baby. But then she found someone else to watch the baby. And so he's like, okay, so do you still need me? And she said, well, I found someone else to watch the baby. He's like, okay. So he went to his golf game, and she was offended and upset because he went to his golf game. As a woman, I understand. I get that. We want our husbands to take that initiative on their own without being told. We want them to just naturally think about us like that, because we would, right? We would be at that appointment with our spouse. We wouldn't just leave them behind. Men don't think like that. They just don't. And I understand that can be frustrating. I understand how that can be hurtful. I understand. But they just don't think like that. He was, okay, she doesn't need me. I'm going to my golf game. She found someone else to watch the baby. I'm going to go play my game. She don't need me, because she essentially said that she doesn't need him. Now she can talk to him and tell him, man, that really hurt. And then hopefully he'll do better next time. But she needed to be clear about what she wanted and expected from him, because that's just the way men are. They don't think about things like that. And I get how hard that is, but we need to have grace for that. We need to be understanding that men just don't do subtleties. They aren't like us. And we need to give them that grace. And we need to give our husbands the chance to lead. I think that so often we just take that control and we think that we do it better and our husbands do it wrong because they're not doing it our way. So we just take that control and we don't give them the chance to step up. We don't give them the chance to lead. And again, that goes back, I think, to the beginning with Genesis, that we want that control and we feel like we should have that control. And that's, again, something that we need to swallow our pride in and let them lead. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I understand that because there's times where I may not like what Dwayne decides, or I don't like the way he chooses to do something. And I mean, I was watching him do dishes one time and he was getting irritated with me because I was like, gotta wash the back of the dish, or, stupid stuff like that.
I wash the back of the dishes.
But that's just the way women are. We tend to be like that. Driving. He doesn't like me being in the car when he's driving because I'm judging his driving, I guess.
She's a backseat driver. So she drives now anytime we go anywhere. She's driving me around now.
When he's driving, and listen, he's a bad driver, okay? Everyone says that. His family warned me of that. But when he's driving, I'm going, I'm making those, I guess, fearful noises. And so again, he's given me that responsibility of driving because he doesn't want to listen to me, stomping the fake brake, the invisible brake, and my catching my breath and all that. But again, he's still the head. He's still the leader of our family, and he still recognizes his weaknesses and my strengths and gives me the room, I guess. He gives me the space to use my strengths. He gives me the space to do what I'm good at, and he trusts me to do what I'm good at. He knows that things will be taken care of within these manner of like the finances and getting the kids to their doctor's appointments or doing this or doing that. He trusts me to do that. And again, that's a complementarian relationship, I guess is the word for it. And like he said earlier, our strengths help each other, and that makes our marriage strong. Our strengths help each other. Our weaknesses help each other, because where I'm weak, he's strong. Where he's weak, I'm strong. And that's really where we have to recognize our marriages and what we're doing in our marriages. And our husbands, they do have to take that responsibility of being the leader, but being the leader does not mean that they can just abuse us emotionally, physically, mentally. That's not right. That's not okay. They are not loving you as Christ loves the church if they're doing that, and they are breaking their vows if they're doing that, period. Because he vowed to honor you and love you and cherish you the same way that Christ loves the church. And when your husband is not doing that, when he's being selfish and going out and partying and not being there for you, if he's doing anything out of a selfish motivation, he's not loving you the way Christ loves the church. But when you are doing something out of a selfish motivation, you also are not loving him and you're not submitting to him. There has to be communication. There has to be balance. There has to be understanding. There has to be reasoning. There has to be communication. There has to be communication. And each of you needs to understand why you feel the way you feel in any given situation. And then you need to explain that to each other. And then you need to compromise and help each other and do your best to meet the needs of the other person. Another thing that these women in these groups talk about is porn. And that is a big thing that women are struggling with in their marriages. And every other post in the groups, they have to do with their husbands watching porn. And there's drastic comments on both sides of the aisle with advice to say that it's straight cheating and you need to divorce. He's committing adultery, so you have biblical grounds for divorce. And then you have the other side that says it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. And I say it's sin. It is a big deal. It is unfaithful. I like the way someone put it. It's unfaithfulness, but it's not cheating. Yes, he is being unfaithful and he's looking at something other than you. He's not going to get someone else pregnant. He's not going to bring home an STD by looking at porn. I think the Bible is literal when it talks about adultery. I think that is talking about physical cheating, physical adultery. And I don't think that porn falls under that. A lot of women in these groups do. And they say he's committing adultery and you need to leave and you need to divorce. And I just don't have the same opinion. Porn is damaging. It's hurtful. It changes the brain, just like any other addiction. It changes the way the brain works, and it messes with testosterone levels. An article just came out. I just saw it the other day that it messes with testosterone levels, and it's hurtful. It makes women feel less than, like we don't live up to those women on the shows, especially if those women in porn are doing things that we just aren't comfortable with. That makes us feel bad. Most of us, a lot of us, we have kids. Our bodies don't look like those women in porn, and it makes us feel bad. It's damaging, and it's sin, and it's a similar sin that anyone else struggles with. I struggle with impatience, and I can have a temper, and I have days where I can do really good. I have weeks where I can do really good, got control of my temper, I'm having patience, I'm in a better place, and then bad night's sleep, get some bad news, have a bad day at work, whatever the situation, and all that goes out the window, and I'm giving into my flesh, and I'm losing my patience with the kids, and I'm yelling at them, and don't have patience with Dwayne, whatever. Porn is a similar situation where I don't feel that anyone that watches porn is truly happy. I don't feel that they feel good about themselves doing that. I don't feel that they like that in the moment, sure, but ultimately I don't see how anyone that's watching porn feels good about themselves. And we need to have the understanding and the grace that if your husband he's refraining and he's doing really good, and then he gives in to his flesh and he watches porn, again, understand that it has nothing to do with you, and it's not about you not looking like the women. It's not about you not doing what those women do. Understand that it's a sin and it's a struggle that he is struggling with, and have grace, the same grace that you want, the same grace that I want when I lose my temper and give into my flesh. Have grace with your husband for that. I think that, man, I've seen comments from these women, I wanted to kill myself over this, and I'm just, these women, I just feel are so self-righteous, I guess. I feel a lot of those comments are very self-righteous, and like I said before, I'm very disappointed in some of those. I'm blown away and disappointed by some of those comments from these women just advising divorce without taking into consideration both sides of the story. There are situations where porn use is so destructive that you may need to separate. I'm not talking about divorce. I'm not giving you advice one way or the other on that, but there may need to be a separation so that your husband can work on himself, you can work on yourself, whatever. But I'm not going to advise one way or another on that. Only you can make that decision, and you need to do that with the help of a godly counselor, whether that's an actual Christian counselor, pastoral help, elders, whatever. You need to do that with help, and you need to come to the best decision, and of course with Christ. But the point of all this is have grace that some days he's going to be weaker, some days he'll be stronger, and some days he's going to give into his flesh. If you're struggling with porn in your marriage, have grace, because coming from a place of judgment, I've seen women say, I'm just disgusted with him. I look at him with disgust. We could say that about every sin. If you struggle with jealousy, are you someone that struggles with jealousy? Even if your husband's not looking at porn or not doing anything, but you're just jealous and he can't even go to work without you being suspicious of him doing something. He can't talk to another woman at church without you being suspicious and jealous. That's equally a sin. That's not right. That's not okay. And that's equally damaging to your relationship. Anger can be equally damaging to your relationship. Again, it all comes down to pride. Where there is strife, there is pride. And we really need to swallow our pride, and we need to have grace. Porn is an issue. It's not okay. It's damaging, and it needs to be addressed. You also need to have grace, because nagging him, not even with just porn, just with anything, if he is doing anything, if you are looking at him from a place of self-righteousness or judging him or whatever, you're going to push him further away. It's not going to help. He's not going to want to, I guess, admit his flaws or whatever. Yes, he should, but nobody wants to. Everyone gets defensive. Everyone gets defensive when someone someone comes at us in the wrong way. People get defensive even when you come at them in the right way, but they especially get defensive when we come at them in the wrong way. Have grace. You can talk about it. You can tell him how it hurts you. You can tell him how it makes you feel, and talk to him about how can you help him overcome this? How can you help him through it? What does he need from you? Communication. Again, communication. You need to have communication. So I encourage you, whatever you're going through, again, like I said in the beginning, submit to Christ. Even if it's with porn, you know what God is calling you to do. You can feel it. You can feel it. I can feel it. I know what God is calling me to do in any given moment. I encourage you to do the same. I encourage you to go against your own pride, to go against your own stubbornness, and submit to Christ. Submit to Him, and it'll naturally flow down to your husband.
And remember that marriages are works in progress all the time. For the rest of your lives, whoever's married, for the rest of your lives, your marriage is going to be a work in progress. So both sides have things that fall short of the glory of God that need working on, that need to be removed. And for the rest of your life, that's going to be taking place. That's called sanctification, the process of being made holy. So that's brought into your marriage. For the husband, dying to self, being humble, and learning and growing in his leadership role are essential. And likewise for the woman, growing in her humility, dying to herself, and learning and growing in her submission are essential. These things are a constant work in progress. Lindsay and I are marriage mentors, but at the same time, it's not like we never have conflict. Whatever it may be, we're constantly growing in our marriage. And like she said earlier, in regards to the porn, have grace upon your husband, but at the same time, it goes both ways. Whatever shortcomings your spouse has, have grace upon it and patience. Above all else, pray for your spouse for whatever things that you see that might be a detriment to your relationship and to their relationship with Jesus. Pray for that person. That's the biggest thing that you can do in the background. Of course, there's a lot of things that we might see that we might not like in our spouse. And although you might have set boundaries and they keep on breaking it, pray for that person. That's the biggest work that you can do instead of trying to just physically change them yourself. Pray for them and let God work in their hearts and see how that plays out.
Yeah, work together, communicate, and remember, you're on the same team. You are one. Stop separating. Stop wanting to win at the sacrifice of your marriage, and again, submit to Christ. Both of you need to submit to Christ. He needs to submit to Christ too, just as much as we do. And when we do that, when we put God first, when we submit to Him over our own desires, the marriage will win. So I encourage you guys to do that. And I think that's what we have for today. So Dwayne, go ahead and pray.
I just want to thank you, Lord, for blessing us today with another podcast. I just pray that although we do give advice to the people who are watching or listening to this, that you would just help us to be able to take heed to our advice. I know Romans 2 says that he who teaches, don't they teach themselves? So I know that everything that we say, we can learn and grow from ourselves. Even if we know them to be true, the more we speak these things out, the more it reminds us of where we should be and the things that we need to work on. And all of these things for your glory. I pray that you give the women strength to be humble, give them discernment, just help them to understand what they should be doing in their marriages. And I just pray for their spouses that might be struggling with whatever issue that it might be that's causing issues in their relationships, and that you would just cause our brothers and sisters in the Lord to just continue to grow and bear fruit worthy of repentance. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for listening, and like and share and follow us. We are on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, as well as I think all of the main podcast streaming places. So let us know what you think. You can email us. You can message us on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever. We want to help pray for you, and hope you guys have a good week.